What happens when Vince McMahon decides to push Mean Gene Okerlund to his limit? During the WWF's national expansion, aside from the wrestlers themselves, two men became the face of the company: Vince McMahon and Mean Gene Okerlund. Vince was the owner, but also the ringside play-by-play man. Mean Gene was the backstage interviewer who made every promo memorable. They helped take the WWF from a territory to a national juggernaut. But behind the scenes, their relationship was anything but smooth, filled with hirings, firings, quitting, and more drama than a steel cage match. This is the untold story of two giants whose rocky bond shaped wrestling history. What sparked the first cracks in their partnership? Vince McMahon took over the WWF from his father in the early 80s with plans for total national domination. One of his first big moves was poaching Mean Gene Okerlund from the AWA in 1984. Vince wanted credible interviewers, and Gene checked every box. Okerlund quickly became the face and voice of WWF interviews. Hulk Hogan, the Iron Sheik, Wendy Richter, celebrities like Andy Warhol, Mean Gene could work with anyone. Vince let him ad-lib, improvise, and be himself, and it worked. But as WWF grew, Vince became more controlling. The freedom that made Gene so good was slowly replaced with scripts, polish, and rehearsals. Arguments started, sometimes loud and public. The man who gave WWF its voice was starting to push back. How did Tuesday Night Titans turn their rivalry up a notch? The tension peaked with Tuesday Night Titans, a variety show Vince McMahon hosted. TNT for short was sort of a talk show mixed with a little bit of variety show and sketch comedy. When the show ended, Vince handed hosting duties to Gene. Okerlund believed this was to make it look like he had killed the show, not Vince. Whether true or not, it caused a rift. At the 1987 Slammy Awards, a backstage argument led Gene to quitting the company. Gene got into it with Vince on how the show was being run, only to return the very next day as if nothing had happened. Okerlund started to notice that something was off when McMahon began hiring new talent as possible replacements if need be. Things really got heated when Vince pulled Okerlund off the road, sticking him in Stamford to host the WWF Event Center. It was a grueling job, filming hours of localized promos for dozens of cities, 4 days a week, 8 hours a day, with 90 cities getting individual mentions. If a wrestler got injured, he'd have to refilm segments. Gene hated it and threatened to walk if he didn't get out. Vince replaced him with Craig DeGeorge and later Sean Mooney. Gene became the mentor for Sean Mooney, teaching him the ropes of the gig. In June of 1988, McMahon fired Mean Gene Okerlund after training Sean Mooney. Okerlund's voiceover work at the beginning of a WWF broadcast where he said, "The World Wrestling Federation, what the world is watching," was immediately replaced by the voice of Howard Finkel. Gene's legacy was replaced, revoiced, and erased overnight. One day you're the voice of a generation, the next, history. What happened after McMahon cut ties with Mean Gene? McMahon's termination of Mean Gene didn't last long. Months later, Vince brought Gene back with a lighter role, but tensions lingered. Gene claimed he didn't speak to Vince for the last 3 years in the company. Gene was given pay-per-view interviews and continued to host All-American Wrestling. When All-American Wrestling thrived, giving good ratings, McMahon ignored it. In 1993, Vince poured his time and money into WWF Monday Night Raw. He hired Todd Pettengill and Jim Ross, slighting Gene. In 1993, McMahon let Okerlund's contract lapse. He says Vince didn't even bother to make him an offer, pushing him to WCW where he bashed Vince on the WCW hotline. Jim Ross would say years later he didn't agree with Vince's decision, feeling that Mean Gene was one of the faces of the company. Vince simply wanted fresh and younger faces representing the WWF. Years later, Vince would parody Mean Gene on WWF TV as Scheme Gene. Clearly, resentment still lingered on both sides, now on public display in WCW and WWF. Mean Gene went from a trusting voice to expendable relic. Okerlund's exit proved no one was bigger than the brand. How did this relationship end once WCW was purchased by WWF in 2001? The tension lasted until WCW folded in 2001. Okerlund briefly tried to be a part of a brand new promotion called XWF, which was run by Jimmy Hart, Brian Knobbs, and Greg Valentine, with influence from Hulk Hogan. This didn't last long, and with the writing on the wall, Mean Gene made his return to WWF in 2001 at WrestleMania 17, announcing alongside Bobby Heenan for the gimmick Battle Royal. Mean Gene was also given a new role in WWE as the host of Confidential in 2002. This lasted for about 2 years as a full-time job for Gene. Mean Gene would go on to appear on WWF television in backstage segments randomly, appearing on panel shows discussing the old days of wrestling, and would even appear on a WWE reality show called Legends House that was heavily promoted for the new WWE network. Mean Gene was also inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2006. Mean Gene would appear on WWE TV as a special guest for the remainder of his life and career until his death in 2019. The relationship between Vince and Gene might not have been perfect, but Gene had a home as a bona fide legend of pro wrestling. From being Vince's trusted hire to quitting, being fired, jumping to the competition, and finally returning home, the story of Vince McMahon and Mean Gene proves that even in wrestling, sometimes the real drama is backstage. Make sure that you're subscribed and have the bell clicked, because I go live every Sunday night at 6 Eastern and play classic CWA Memphis wrestling. And if you enjoyed that video, check out the time that Vince McMahon shut down a pro wrestling company overnight. You can check that out right here.